Cleopatra, power, brains, and a legacy as Egypt's last pharaoh that still fascinates us today. But beneath it all has long laid an important question. Did Cleopatra's bloodline trace back to Alexander the Great? The truth is that no, Cleopatra was not actually a descendant of Alexander by blood, but she was his last political heir. Let's uncover the real story of Cleopatra, the kingdom she inherited, and the empire she fought to keep alive. When Alexander the Great died, he left behind not just a vast empire, but an unfillable void. His dream of a united realm stretching from Greece to Egypt, from Persia to India, died with him. The men who had once sworn loyalty to him turned on each other, carving his empire into pieces in a brutal conflict known as the Wars of the Diadochi. Alexander had not named a clear successor, leaving his generals, each ambitious, each hungry for power, to fight over his empire. The alliances they had once built under Alexander fractured, turning former brothers-in-arms into bitter rivals. Egypt became the prize of one of Alexander's most trusted generals, Ptolemy I. Unlike many of the other Diadochi, who sought to control Alexander's entire empire, Ptolemy made a calculated move. He did not aim to rule from Babylon or Macedonia. He saw Egypt as the key to lasting power. With its wealth, strategic position, and deep cultural roots, Egypt offered a kingdom that could sustain itself. So Ptolemy took control, initially as a governor, but he soon declared himself pharaoh, securing his place as the founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty. His ability to navigate the treacherous politics of the Diadochi ensured that his rule would endure long after many of his rivals had fallen. Unlike the other formal generals, Ptolemy also understood the power of legacy. He brought Alexander's body to Egypt, enshrining him in a grand tomb in Alexandria, which further legitimized his rule. Ptolemy wanted to tie himself to Alexander not just through conquest, but through symbolism, ensuring that his dynasty would always be linked to the man who had conquered the known world. Some stories claimed that Ptolemy was more than just Alexander's general. Some whispered he was Alexander's half-brother, the illegitimate son of King Philip II. A convenient myth, perhaps, one that may have strengthened the legitimacy of his rule and contributed to confusion about Cleopatra's heritage. But the truth is that Cleopatra's bloodline originated not from the conqueror himself, but from the general who took Egypt in the chaos after his death. As ruler, Ptolemy did more than secure Egypt. He reshaped it. He adopted the title of pharaoh, but ruled as a Hellenistic king, merging Greek military traditions with Egyptian religious customs. He transformed Alexandria into a center of learning and power, its lighthouse guiding ships from across the Mediterranean. The Ptolemies that followed him built upon his legacy, maintaining Greek customs while ruling an Egyptian land. Their power seemed absolute. But beneath the marble statues and sprawling library of Alexandria, tensions simmered. The Ptolemies relied on a fragile balance between their Macedonian elite and the vast Egyptian population they ruled over. The Greek aristocracy controlled the wealth, while native Egyptians, despite being the majority, were often excluded from positions of power. Naturally, over time, resentment grew. The dynasty survived through strategic alliances, brutal rivalries, and an unwavering commitment to preserving its Greek identity. So for 3 centuries, the Ptolemies ruled over Egypt as conquerors. They kept their own language, their own customs, and even their bloodline pure, marrying within their own family to preserve their Macedonian lineage. But even as they clung to their past, the world around them was shifting. When Cleopatra came of age, she would inherit more than a throne. She would inherit a kingdom caught between its ancient Egyptian traditions, its decidedly Greek rulers, and the rising power of Rome. But Cleopatra was no ordinary ruler. Unlike her predecessors, she understood that survival depended on more than royal blood. It required total reinvention. Cleopatra was a product of a dynasty that had ruled Egypt but never became truly Egyptian. She was born to Ptolemy VII, a ruler whose throne relied more on wavering Roman support than on Egyptian loyalty. The Ptolemaic rulers lived in Alexandria, a city founded by Alexander himself, a beacon of Greek culture in a land of ancient traditions. They spoke Koine Greek, surrounded themselves with Greek aristocracy, and rarely ventured beyond Alexandria's grand halls. But Cleopatra was determined to rule differently. She was the first of her line to speak Egyptian, and the first to present herself as a true pharaoh, not just a foreign ruler. So, to her people, Cleopatra was not just their queen. She was a long-awaited bridge between two worlds. And in a kingdom where Greek and Egyptian cultures still coexisted uneasily, that distinction would define her reign. Cleopatra's court was filled with scholars, scientists, and diplomats from all over the Mediterranean. Alexandria was an intellectual powerhouse, home to the Great Library and a hub of international influence. Cleopatra surrounded herself with thinkers and strategists, understanding that to rule Egypt and outmaneuver Rome, she needed not just military strength, but knowledge and alliances her predecessors had overlooked. Under Cleopatra, Egypt flourished in ways unseen since its golden age. But could even the most brilliant ruler protect her kingdom from the inevitable? As Rome's influence tightened, Cleopatra would have to fight for more than just a throne. She would have to fight for Egypt's very survival. Before long, Rome was no longer just a distant power. It was a force that could not be ignored. The assassination of Pompey the Great, orchestrated by Cleopatra's brother Ptolemy VIII, dragged Egypt into the center of Roman affairs. So Cleopatra saw her chance, and she took it. Legend has it that Cleopatra smuggled herself into Julius Caesar's palace wrapped in a rug. What truly happened may never be known, but what matters is the result. She won his support and secured her place as Queen of Egypt. Unlike the Ptolemaic rulers before her, Cleopatra did not merely rule from the confines of Alexandria's palaces. She actively shaped Egypt's fate in a world increasingly dominated by Rome. Cleopatra's relationship with Julius Caesar was more than political strategy. It was a calculated move to secure her throne in a time when Egypt's sovereignty was in question. She even bore him a son, Caesarion, a child whose very existence was a challenge to Roman authority. But when Caesar was assassinated, Cleopatra's fragile alliance with Rome unraveled. She needed a new protector, and she found one in Mark Antony. Mark Antony, one of Rome's most powerful figures, became Cleopatra's closest ally and lover. Their relationship was not just one of passion, but of ambition. Together, they sought to create a new power in the Mediterranean, one that could rival even Rome itself. They ruled from Alexandria, blending Egyptian and Roman influences, and together they had 3 children. Cleopatra envisioned a future where Egypt and Antony's Eastern Roman territories would stand as an independent force, one free from the shadow of Octavian, who would go on to become the first Roman emperor. But Rome would not allow it. Octavian, Julius Caesar's heir, saw Cleopatra and Antony as a threat to his growing dominance. Their fate was sealed in 31 BCE at the Battle of Actium, where Octavian's forces decisively defeated their fleet. Cleopatra and Antony returned to Egypt, their power crumbling around them. As Octavian's legions approached Alexandria, Antony, believing Cleopatra had already taken her own life, fell on his sword. Cleopatra, however, was still very much alive. In one final act of defiance, she sought to negotiate with Octavian, hoping to preserve Egypt's autonomy in some form. But Octavian had no interest in compromise. Cleopatra was to be paraded through Rome as a symbol of Egypt's submission. Rather than suffer this humiliation, Cleopatra chose death. The image of her final moments is legendary. The Queen of Egypt allowing an asp to bite her, ending her life on her own terms. Whether the details of her demise are rooted in fact or myth, the result is the same. With her death, Egypt lost its last independent ruler. The Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled for nearly 3 centuries, was no more. Egypt became a province of Rome, absorbed into an empire that now stretched from Britain to the banks of the Nile. Cleopatra's death marked the end of Egypt as a kingdom and the end of the Hellenistic era, the final echoes of Alexander's world. Cleopatra may not have been Alexander's descendant by blood, but she was, in many ways, his last political heir. She ruled from the city he founded, led a dynasty established by one of his generals, and upheld the Hellenistic world he left behind. When Cleopatra died, the last embers of Alexander's world finally faded. Yet, much like Alexander, Cleopatra's story did not end with the fall of her empire. That was just the start of her transformation into legend. And though she was not of his blood, their stories remain forever intertwined.